welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to do something a little bit different. Now normally I basically look through the kitchen, see what I have, put something together and eat. I am part of a cookbook book club. I participate in that every so often. So I do have an event to go to tomorrow, and the premise for this group is every month they select a cookbook, and you basically pick a recipe, cook it, you get together potluck style. It's a community building type of a group, but people who like food, so totally up my alley. So the book that we're cooking out of this time is called The Silver Spoon. Now, The Silver Spoon is an enormous cookbook. It's like minimum 2 inches thick. It has a lot of recipes, all Italian based. It's supposed to be kind of like a cornerstone for Italian cooking. I'm just going to leave it at that. I'm not even going to put my 2 cents in right now. It's supposedly one of the most influential Italian cookbooks around. I will have it linked down below in case you're interested. When I went to go seek out the book to kind of see if I wanted to participate in this particular event, it took me a long time just because there is so much to it. And I ended up picking a recipe called Sartu. Sartu is a dish from the Naples region of Italy, and I've never had it before and I was not familiar with it. So, I went ahead and transcribed the recipe so that I would have it, and then I did a little bit of research. The recipe that I have versus the other videos that I've watched other people prepare it, it's not exactly the same, both in preparation and ingredients. And that could be just based on what individuals have at their disposal. But even the preparation, it's kind of like not entirely consistent. Almost as if each household had their own version, which is very likely. And even as I sit and read through the recipe, there are things that I would change, and I probably will, because there are no herbs at all in here, and I can't fathom like making an Italian dish without either parsley or basil or oregano or something. And this recipe also calls for dried mushrooms, which I did not have. I didn't go out of my way to seek them out, so I just bought mushrooms at the store and I'll cook them down anyways. I will have the recipe written below, but I do want to let you know that it is from the Silver Spoon cookbook. Because there's a lot of steps to this, I'm going to be preparing certain items today, and then tomorrow I'll just put everything together and cook the final product. I'm not going to show you all the ingredients because it's a bit lengthy, but I will be showing you like pieces of what I'm doing, and then tomorrow I'll just show you how I put it all together. Now, if you're asking what is Sartu, to me this seems in between a giant arancine and a pasta forno. If you haven't had arancine before, they are delicious. I do know how to make them. I do make them, but that's kind of a once a year thing because, again, it's a process. Possibly down the line I'll do that for you, but in the meantime, this is what I'm going to be attempting. First, I'm going to start by cooking the mushrooms. Now, the recipe calls for dried mushrooms, and then you soak them, and then you squeeze them out, chop them up, and then saute for like 20 minutes. That's an awful long time, and it uses a lot of butter too. So instead, I'm going to do part butter, part olive oil, and I'm using cremini mushrooms, and I'm just going to basically saute them until they're cooked down, and then I'll set that aside. I will be adding some salt and pepper. Will I add anything else? I might add a little wine, we'll see. So I went ahead and put a pinch of salt and a good crack of pepper, and I did go ahead and put in a splash of red wine this time, because there's going to be like tomato and meat, you know, I'm going to go with the red. And then I'm just going to continue to cook this until, you know, they've gotten most of the liquid out, actually all the liquid out as much as possible, and then I'll just set it aside for tomorrow. So now that this is browned and caramelized, I'm going to take them out of the pan, set it aside to cool, and then put it in the fridge. Okay, so now the second thing I'm going to prepare are little meatballs. I have some ground beef as well as some bread that's been soaking in milk. I have added a bit of parsley and some garlic, and then there's salt and pepper in here. I also have some flour that I'm just going to toss that in and then set it aside, and then I'm going to cook it over the stove. So, you know, again, I'm not putting cheese into these meatballs because there is going to be a lot of cheese in the rest of the dish, so it's not necessary to double up. I'm going to get this well incorporated. Okay, now the recipe calls for hazelnut-sized meatballs, which is awfully small, but you know, if you were really that lazy, you can make them slightly bigger and then after they're cooked, cut them in half, but honestly, it's not too much trouble. So I'm just gonna start forming them, and then I'm gonna put them on a plate. And you know, if you were to do this and just to make the meatballs and put it in the freezer, you can always pull them out when you're making some kind of soup, and that's really good. The reason you toss them in the flour is so that they don't dry out when you fry them. Hazelnut size. Hazelnuts are small. The other thing is there is no egg in here, and that's because you will be pouring beaten egg before it goes into the oven, into the filling. So I'm gonna say that this is gonna be the most time-consuming part, is forming the meatballs, not necessarily frying them. They're small, so they'll cook up pretty quick. The other thing that I didn't quite like about the recipe measurements, you know, like it just called for 3.5 ounces of ground beef. Well, I'm not gonna go to the butcher and ask for 3.5 ounces of ground beef. I got a half a pound. I'm gonna cook it, and if I have leftovers, I already know like what I'm gonna do with it. But the recipe says that it would yield enough for 6 people, and I already know I'm making more than that. So again, I'm adjusting the recipe to my needs. This is like watching Alice and Roman chop shallots. It is never ending, but I see a light at the end of the tunnel, so hopefully it won't be too much longer. Okay, so I have them all coated in a bit of flour, and now we're going to fry. Before I start, I do want to give a couple of pointers about frying, because I feel that there's a lot of people out there who actually don't know how. You want your fat in the pan to be a correct temperature. You don't want your food to absorb all the oil, because that's when it gets greasy. And you know, if your oil is too hot or too low, that can be an issue. So you want it to be the right temperature, and then you want to drain whatever you're cooking afterwards on paper towels. The recipe calls for frying in only butter. I don't really like that when it comes to meatballs, so I did go ahead and mix again butter and olive oil. And you want the pan to sizzle when you drop your food in. If it doesn't, your oil is not hot enough. And then okay, there we go. So I'm gonna do this in batches because I don't want to overcrowd the pan. Plus there's kind of a lot of flour going on, but and once I get these in, I'm just going to roll them around until they're cooked. And I'm going to be adding a splash of wine to this as well. I'm just using a red. And basically you want to toss them around. You don't have to roll the pan like I am. You can go ahead and use a wooden spoon to kind of get them around. However, don't mess with them too much because they are kind of small. You don't want them to like break on you. So you want to let them sit and then kind of move them around once they hold their shape. I've added a bit of wine, not that much, like barely a tablespoon. And for me, this is a lot easier to just move it back and forth. And if you can kind of flip them a little, that would be great, but not necessary. And my second batch is in, almost done. My first batch is draining on some paper towels. So I'm gonna let these meatballs drain really well and cool before I put them in a small dish or storage container, and then I'm gonna put them in the fridge. Okay, now here I have one Italian sausage that I've taken out of the casing, and I'm just gonna cook this up also because this is gonna be part of the filling. Now, my market, I don't know what's up with them, but they only had chicken Italian sausage this time, so that's what I got. And I mean, it's fine because there's still another type of meat that I need to cook, and I will get into that as soon as I get this browned up, and I will also put it to the side. I just left some residual olive oil from cooking the meatballs, and this is just going to brown. The sausage was pretty lean because it is chicken, and I just had a little bit of olive oil in the pan, but I'm going ahead and I'm draining this on a paper towel as well, and then I'm going to transfer it to my storage container. I didn't add any seasoning to the sausage because it's already seasoned. The other thing that the recipe calls for is chicken liver. This is the item that I didn't see anyone else use. However, I am going to use it. The only thing is that chicken liver tends to be pretty delicate. It dries out really quick, so I'm just gonna go ahead and like cut them into smaller pieces, and I'm gonna dredge them in some seasoned flour. So basically flour with some salt and pepper, and then I'm gonna give them a fry in the pan with, again, a pat of butter and mostly olive oil. Now, if this part offends you, I'm not going to apologize. I happen to like chicken liver, and this is part of the recipe. I'm really interested in how it's going to make the entire dish feel and taste. So I am not leaving it out. I'm going to be just cooking it. Again, I'm dredging it in seasoned flour, so flour with salt and pepper. And in a pan, I have a little bit of butter and some olive oil that's heating up, and I'm just gonna cook these. That's it. Now, I've gone ahead and added some sliced onion. This is for flavor. And what I'll do, I'll just pick out the pieces of meat when this is done cooking, and save the onion probably for dinner or something. This is actually a lot of liver. The recipe doesn't call for this much, so you know, but you go to the store, you get a package of chicken liver, so I would suggest get it, cook the whole thing, and then use however much you need for the recipe. In here I have my little meatballs on the side, and then my sausage on another side, and then my liver is still cooling off. I just went ahead and put them all in the same container since they're all going to be mixed together anyways. And then just to give you an idea, I'm using this vessel. So it's not going to come up to the top. However, I'm going to line the sides and the bottom with rice, fill the cavity in the middle, and then put more rice on top. So I do want to have enough filling. There's still some mozzarella cheese that's going to go in there as well, and I need to put in, like, I don't know, some basil. I still have a little more parsley. Something's going to go in there. Sartu day 2. So I'm going to be preparing the rice for the dish, and then I will be assembling it. So let me show you what else is going to go into the dish. So I'm going to be prepping my baking pan with some butter and breadcrumb. And then for the rice, I'm going to be using some onion and tomato, and I will be putting some parsley in that as well. The filling I have already prepared, so that is the chicken liver, mushroom, chicken sausage instead of just pork Italian sausage, and then also the little meatballs that I made. The other thing that's going to go into the filling is some fresh mozzarella, and then I have a few eggs here that's going to get beaten and poured over the filling. I'm basically going to be making risotto. So to my pan I have a mix of butter and olive oil. I've gone ahead and chopped up half of an onion, and I'm going to saute this. A pinch of salt. And I'm not looking to brown this, I'm just looking to sweat the onion and get them a bit translucent. So I added the tomato, a couple spoonfuls of sauce, and I'm going to add a little bit of wine, not very much, just a little bit. Again, kind of to deglaze the pan because I'm not using a nonstick, I'm just using a regular pan. And then I'm going to add my rice. And I'm using a whole package, so this is going to make way more than what the recipe calls for. Again, I'm making a bigger portion of it though, and if I have leftover, I'm not worried about that. I'm going to stir that around. And then I have some beef broth on the side, and I'm going to start ladling this in. And I'm just going to repeat this process until it's done. Now, because I'm not using a nonstick pan and I don't want my rice to stick to the bottom, I do want to kind of go underneath with my wooden spoon or spatula, whatever you may be using, so that it doesn't stick. But this is looking quite good. To help hold this together, I did put in a pat of butter, and I am going to put in a sprinkling of cheese. Not like a whole lot for the amount of rice that's in here, but it will help. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and prepare my baking dish. I have a piece of softened butter, and I'm just going to go ahead and rub this around, including the center, because I want this to come out easily. I want to especially get the corners around the perimeter, because that's where you'll have a tendency to have things stick. Then I'm going to pour in some breadcrumb, just kind of a little bit to start, and I want to get this coated, kind of like if you're preparing a cake pan. And then I'm going to cut my fresh mozzarella. I'm going to cut a lot, just because. And for this, I'm going to be cubing it. Now it's a matter of assembling. My rice has cooled enough so that I can handle it. And I'm basically going to spoon a layer on the bottom and spread it out and up the sides a little bit so that I make a well. And I mean, you want to leave some rice left over to cover the filling. So I would leave about a quarter of the rice, maybe a little less, but kind of, again, you just have to see how much you've got and then adjust from there as far as how high you want your rice to be. I have a lot of filling, so I have a feeling I'm gonna have left over. I usually do. I always have more filling than rice, but I don't mind it. You can always toss it with some pasta and some sauce, and you know, that's dinner for another night. The other thing, as you're filling it, you do want to press it down so that you know, there are no loose pockets. If it's loose, then it's going to fall apart. You want this to be compacted now, and it'll just be better when it's baking. So how I usually do it, not that I've made this before because I haven't, but if you're having something like this, like a cake pan or a bundt pan, and you need to press things down, I usually curve my knuckles and then I will kind of press down into it just to make sure that it's all nestled in there, and that ensures, you know, that everything is tucked in. Now, this was the other thing that I'm not going to say it's unusual, because again, this is a first for me, but the recipe calls for beaten egg versus the other people that I saw, they were using chopped boiled egg. Now I can see where the beaten egg can, again, act as holding everything together, which I sure hope it does. But so the idea is you're going to beat the egg and then pour it inside or over your filling. To the egg, I've added a little bit of salt and pepper and also just a bit of water, and this is so that, you know, it was easier to break, and it'll hopefully be easier to sink through. And you're going to go around slowly. Over your filling. Okay, and then I'm gonna layer the rest of my rice over the top. And again, just press it down so you'll get a nice even layer. Again, you do want to just press it down so that it's, you know, no air in there. And then at the end, you're gonna dot the top with a bit of butter and then sprinkle some breadcrumb. And this is ready for the oven. Okay, so I've just taken this out of the oven, and it does need to rest for about 10 to 15 minutes. And then I will invert this on a plate.
There we go. Oh, be careful. You're there for the crumbs. Oh, yeah.
I love the way she pats it on the bottom.
I don't know if you have enough wine here. If I would have known you got this, I wouldn't have brought this.
Okay, this is gonna take a minute. You can like pause that.
I'm not turning it off. This is like real time.
This is not. This is my mother. So I need to get that.
Yeah.
Have you made Sartu before?
I have not. I've not even had it before.
Oh, okay.
So,
I'm very excited.
me too. If not,
What? Wait, lift slowly. Let's see.
I don't want to.
Is there?
Yeah.
Is it coming?
No,
Pebbles, right?
I know.
you might need to cut more.
okay.
Jamie, good to meet you.
Corey.
Erin. Hi, Erin. How's it going? Look, I put the bag here.
Erin, what are these that you brought?